It's 2 minutes past 4 in Radio Cairo. This is Dr. Amr Mabrouk, and I'm Mohammed at the control. We are coming live from Studio 3 in the world of info.
Cairo.
Well, it's a very cold, windy day in Cairo. It's a beautiful afternoon. The sun is trying to come away from these clouds, and this weather is matching a beautiful city that we love and a country that also we admire. The city of London has a characteristic weather like this, and nobody tells us more about the weather in London and about London than His Excellency, the Ambassador of Britain in Cairo, Mr. Gareth Bayely, the Ambassador in Egypt. He's been here for 6 months. He's having a lot of friends. He's making a marvelous job representing his government, and we're so grateful that you were able to come in our program in this beautiful afternoon. Sir, really, thank you very much for coming to our radio program.
Thank you very much, Amr. It's a pleasure to be here. You're right, the weather is a spring-like, we would say, in London. In Scotland, where I'm come from, we describe this as summer. I think Egyptians would call this winter. So, yes, we have something very, very familiar right here.
Well, His Excellency is coming from the city of Aberdeen, a very dear city to me and to my family, because I have some relatives in Scotland, right? And my sister is having a Scottish nationality. If we may use the word nationality, I know that
you can
definitely love that. Yes, she was born in Edinburgh, and so Scotland and Britain is a dear country to us, and His Excellency is an Arabist, if we may use the expression for the Foreign Service. He speaks very fluent Arabic. He served in a lot of countries in the Middle East. He was the Assistant Foreign Minister for Asia, for South Asia. He served in Egypt, in New York, in Turkey, Istanbul, Afghanistan, Iraq, and now he's currently in his ambassadorship here in Egypt, having a very busy time. And there is a famous Chinese saying, I think it's a curse more than a saying, which says, may you live interesting times. Because this is not a prayer, this is not a good omen. It is interesting times because are the times which are full of things that are unforgettable. And I think nothing matches what we're living through these days. So, unfortunately, you are living a lot of interesting times here, sir.
That is true. That is true. It's the times we live are undoubtedly tough. I'm very aware with Egypt just how the country is coping with all the crises that go on around it. I always like to say that Egypt is like an oasis in a desert of instability and a desert of difficult challenges. So yes. I feel privileged to be here. It's my second time in Egypt. I was here in the 90s and 2002 until 2002, at the time of President Mubarack, Allah yarhamu. And it's good to be back. It's good to be back in Dunya. And I'm delighted to be on your program, which is very famous.
Really, thank you very much for this beautiful compliment. Definitely, the honor is definitely ours. And definitely when we talk about Britain and Egypt and the relations between Britain and Egypt, it goes way through history. Not just to mention a lot of bad times, but also we have to mention a lot of good times. Definitely there is the bridge of education, there is the bridge of cultural exchange, there is the bridge of mutual understanding that is happening recently in the, shall we say, in the last 30 or 40 years, where there is a lot of understanding, a lot of water has crossed under the bridge in our relations between Egypt and Britain. And definitely, even during hard times, even after 1956, my parents went to have their education in Britain in 1957, and they received a lot of a marvelous reception, and the people were always warm to them and helping them, and they came back with the proper education where they went for, and they used this education to build pillars of understanding and pillars of science and pillars of cooperation in between Britain and Egypt. So we'll talk about what brings us together, not what divides us, because there is a lot that brings us together. For example, we'd like to start with the famous notion about the misnomer of the name. Although the United Kingdom is a sovereign country, England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland are also widely referred to as countries. The UK Prime Minister's website has used the phrase countries within a country to describe the United Kingdom. Is this a point of strength or weakness, being Scottish yourself, sir?
So one of the things as an ambassador that I find can be the hardest thing to describe is what is even the name of my country.
Yes.
So if you are from Spain, you are from Spain. If you are from Egypt, it is obvious you are from Egypt, min Masr. الجمهورية العربية maybe, but still Masr. And for my own country, we have this extraordinary name, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, which is not only long, but it's quite confusing. And when you write in your when you arrive at the airport and fill in the card, then you write UK and nobody knows what you're talking about. So, and as you say, we have this idea of countries within a country. I myself am Scottish, and I cannot imagine the idea of the four component countries being separated. Somehow, what divides us can make us stronger. And I think I'm thinking now here about the United States, a pluribus unum, the idea that you have pluralism, but out of that diversity you have unity. So these four countries together help each other, they support each other. They are all quite different in many ways, but they are all undeniably British, or of the United Kingdom. And if I think about back in history, in 1603 there was a king, King James VI of Scotland, and he went south to England and became King James I of England, because they had never had a James before. They'd had kings, but they never had a James. So this gentleman had the most unusual title of King James I and VI of the United Realms, all together as one. And this is never forgotten, that the Scottish king went south one probably rainy day, given the weather, and arrived in London to assume the throne in there, probably a bit sunnier. Usually that's the way the weather is. And you had this sense of unity across the Union. So I think it's a point of strength. We have different economies, different cultural approaches. The men in Scotland can sometimes be seen to be wearing something called a kilt, which is a more a skirt.
You have a special kilt for your family, definitely, right?
Of course. We've got with the special tartan. Yes. The French would call this a Scottish skirt, jupe écossaise, and nobody in England would ever be seen wearing such a thing. But the fun and the joy of the country comes from this idea that we can respect each other's differences and still be one country and one nation. So I don't think I'm too worried about it.
So this is lovely, because as we have sailed through your CV together before going on air, you have a very colourful education. You had the chance to study in Oxford University, one of the oldest universities in the world and very much prestigious, where you studied the 3 Ps, right? Political science,
yes, and
philosophy and economics,
yes,
exactly. PPE, and then you had it more polished by a master's in public diplomacy in Princeton, which is also another, if we may use the word, Ivy League, or a really amazing place. Yes. So, how much? Because I'm very much interested in education as a professor in the university. I always like to attract the attention of our listeners to the educational backgrounds of our distinguished guests, how they always share with us their experience in their early years, in the years of formation, how the years of formation has shaped the life of His Excellency Gareth Bayly as a diplomat and as a thinker and as a man of Renaissance, if we use the expression.
Well, you may, of course. It's a great compliment. The Scottish educational tradition certainly emphasises the idea that students at school keep a wide range of subjects. They don't specialise too young. And when you specialise later on. And it is quite common to have at your final year of education in Scotland maybe 5 or 6 subjects at advanced level, and then you specialise a bit more in university, but this idea of a broader education. So that was the experience for me in Scotland, a very broad education. And from that, typically I arrived at the point of deciding university. And I could not decide between one thing or the other thing or the other thing, because I had this sense that you needed to remain a person of letters covering more than just one subject. By contrast, it can be the case in the English system that you will focus more tightly on maybe the sciences or maybe liberal arts, humanities, very, very early on. And when you get to university, you're on one subject. So because I'm coming out of this broader tradition, I arrive in Oxford and I classically take up this broad degree called philosophy, politics and economics, which the cruel and critical people among us might say is a perfect degree for learning how to read a newspaper and repeat it.
You've been so modest.
Repeat it quickly to a boss before they find out that you don't know anything at all. So it's a degree which emphasises breadth and speed of acquisition and reading and maybe synthesising ideas. But the critics might be right that it's not a degree necessarily where you really drill down into one thing. And then a complete change for me, switching over to much later in life, in the middle of my career, I switched over to Princeton University, which was an incredible honour to be there, because it's just, if you think about it, it's a university with the finest young minds from America and around the world, all
exactly.
being with a research and funding endowment that makes what the university does world class in any domain. And to be sitting there in Princeton is a huge privilege. But again, I inevitably find myself doing a degree in public policy. Well, what is public policy? It could be anything, right? It could be incredibly general. It could be everything from running hospitals to conducting international relations. Public policy covers a huge multitude of subjects. And again, it's very attractive to somebody from my background because it's not too specific. It's maintaining a regard for generalism. And you touch on a really interesting question. Does the world need more generalists or does it need more specialists? You are a famous and storied professor in plastic surgery, and by God, we do need plastic surgeons in this life, particularly the poor souls who may either be damaged in a crash or they may already have genetic issues, and you would not want somebody with my degree trying to be a plastic surgeon. But at the same time, generalists are very useful for public policy making. They can synthesize ideas, they can balance the pros and cons of different issues, and bring out hopefully a way forward that works for society. So I've always maintained the broad approach, but of course society is nothing without experts, true experts.
Definitely, but a diplomat like yours, and definitely by nature and by training a politician, and by education, of course, really needed this background of education, because this definitely helped you through your career in the Foreign Service, right, sir?
Undoubtedly. Education is... I think I was sitting in a part of... it was Mozambique. I was sitting in Mozambique, in northwest Mozambique in 1994. And wondering what to do with my life, and a gentleman from the United Nations who was an amazing man with 2 PhDs, no fewer than 2. You probably have 2, but I was amazed when he had 2. And he said to me, don't stop educating yourself. You'll be tempted to go into the world of work, and you'll regret it if you go too fast. Education is a gift, and if you can get it, then you should grab it with both hands. It's a huge privilege. And if a state is there to support you, or if you're lucky that your parents can support you, then you should go for it.
Because the sky's the limit.
The sky's the limit. And if you jump too early and you become a worker bee, we would say, somebody in the hive working hard, it's great, you're contributing to society, but you may be missing a chance to broaden your horizons.
Exactly.
His comments never left me that advice. Go forth and educate yourself, he said.
This is very important. Working for your own self in order to improve your culture and your pleasure is definitely important, because nobody knows really his exact intelligence until he indulges in learning and education.
Exactly. Testing yourself.
Testing yourself. So let's go much into in Britain and the COP26. It was held in November in Glasgow, Scotland again.
Yeah.
Today is the day of Scotland. It was
my
a great
hometown, Glasgow. Yes.
It was a great challenge to the whole of the world, with hope for a better future. And Egypt is transmitting on the same wavelengths with COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, hopefully in November also as well this year. How is the UK supporting Egypt in preparing for this COP27, and how far the hopes and expectations of improving the environment and the climate will materialize in our generation, if we use the expression? We don't want them to materialize in the generation of our children or grandchildren, because this will be too late.
No, exactly. So the first thing for me to observe on this is that climate change, fighting climate change, protecting our environment is the number one issue in the world today. And as you said, future generations are depending on us to turn this around. The whole theme of Glasgow was the idea of keeping 1.5 alive, the idea of limiting the warming of the Earth's atmosphere to no greater than 1.5 degrees. And if we fail to meet 1.5, then the consequences are extremely severe. And everything else that is wrong with the world, by comparison, is nothing to that catastrophe, that challenge that faces all of us. So, what can I say about us and Egypt in this regard? That my whole embassy, really, from the man in the garden who is mowing the lawn and looking after the trees, to my climate team, who are experts specifically on climate, but also my trade team, the political team, the protocol team, all of us are working on a green partnership with Egypt. This is what we're calling it, a green partnership. Not just about climate change, but also about Egypt's incredible prospects in green energy and green trade. I see Egypt as a potential green superpower, if you want to use the phrase, because of what Egypt can do in solar, what Egypt can do in wind, what Egypt can do in the green and clean production of hydrogen. It's extraordinary what the potential is here. It really is extraordinary. And also, I think that Minister Shakir of electricity and renewable energy, he would agree completely that
he's a very distinguished man. He's a very cultured and educated, very intelligent man, definitely.
So if we've got this sense of the embassy completely focused on a green partnership, and the COP president, Mr. Sharma, focused on the best partnership possible with his counterparts in Egypt. Of course, Mr. Shukri is going to be the COP president for COP27. Then the humble thing to offer here is that we will do whatever Egypt wants us to do, because we know how hard this is. We had 40,000 delegates, something like 130 heads of government. We had extraordinarily complex three-dimensional negotiations about the interstate discussion on climate change. And on top of that, the extraordinarily huge mobilization of private sector and other non-state actors in climate. So not just state negotiations, but also the private sector negotiations. Bringing it all together in one 2-week plus event was really hard for us. It was the most complex and biggest summit we'd ever held in our whole modern history. And now we look at Egypt as they look to host in Sharm el-Sheikh in November. And again, the words that come to mind are bitawfiq, good luck, but also that we're there to help. We're absolutely there to help. And there are two main people who help. One is Alok Sharma. He is the current president of the of COP26. So the thing about these negotiations is that you have a conference, you have a summit of the parties, and then afterwards you are formally the president. So currently, Mr. Sharma is the president of COP26. However, the whole point is that we hand over the baton to Mr. Shukri in COP27. So Mr. Sharma has come over. He's established a really strong connection with Mr. Shukri. I met him here, but also in other international gatherings to really offer whatever is needed, whatever Egypt wants, by way of whether it's advice about how we did simple things or not so simple things like the logistics, through to how did we conduct campaigns, how did we experience chairing the negotiation, all of that stuff. And beside Mr. Sharma, there's a guy called Nigel Topping. And Nigel Topping is our high-level champion. And the high-level champion's job is to cover everything that's not about states. So everything that's to do with the private sector, universities, cities, governorates, provinces, educational institutions of all kinds, and to mobilise banks, particularly, of course, to mobilise the non-state sector to help fight climate change. So between them, Mr. Sharma and Mr. Topping have got their counterparts. Mr. Sharma is partnered with Mr. Shukri, and Mr. Topping is partnered with Mahmoud Mohieddin, who is the high-level champion.
And he's the vice president of the International Bank as well. Right?
Exactly. So, and is a fantastic symbol of, I would say, the best of what Egypt offers in international.
And definitely he has experience as a minister back in the early 2000s as a minister of economics, and definitely he has an important role, and he has the good education.
And he has the good education, yes. and he knows better than anybody, I think, what the power of the private sector is if the private sector is targeted productively at a good cause like fighting climate change. There's a thing in Glasgow that was put together by former Central Bank of England Governor Mark Carney called the Glasgow it's got the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, GFANZ. And the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero is all about mobilising trillions of dollars of private sector finance into bankable, investable projects which can essentially save the planet. So we've got two obligations here, haven't we? We've got one which is the obligation of the richer world to spend $100 billion for the less rich world to be able to fight climate change. That's the public commitment. And then we've got the private commitment, which is the trillions of dollars that can be mobilised by the private sector. And between them, and between Mr. Sharma and Mr. Topping, you've got basically an offer to Egypt, which is whatever Egypt requires, then the UK will try to help. And then, of course, the show goes on. So then Egypt takes forward COP27 and then passes the baton on to the United Arab Emirates for COP28 next year. And every president recognises that they are just part of a collective effort, and that no one of them can falter or fail because the stakes are too high, the climate catastrophe is too close, and there's no room. There really is no room to
no margin of
hesitate.
error.
There's no margin for error. There's no time to hesitate. So there we are. We're here for Egypt. Egypt's here for the Emirates. We're all here for the world.
So remains a question before we leave the COP27. Is a couple of years ago, I'm not going to mention names, a very important politician, one of the leaders of the world, said there is nothing called climate changes. Everything is fine. I'm going to withdraw myself and withdraw my government.
I think I know who that was.
Yes, well, President Trump said that once, and he said, I'm not convinced, and he just had thrown what we say in Egyptian slang, kursi for club, right?
Yes,
you know this expression, or something that I'm not convinced that this problem really materialize. So how far today is the world leaders committed to this valuable cause, in your opinion, sir?
I mean, I think it's become, what we've noticed over the last couple of years is that this this challenge has become non-optional. There's no negotiation anymore. You can't negotiate with Mother Earth. There's only so many years left to be able to take radical action. And maybe, just maybe, even a few years ago, a head of government could say, I'm not sure about this climate change thing. I'm not sure about the evidence. Or they might be saying something like that even if there is evidence here, I've got other priorities to worry about. I've got other development priorities to concern myself with. I've got to, bottom line, make sure people are fed and safe and warm. And that was probably possible to speak about defensively maybe 5 years ago, maybe. But today the evidence is just everywhere, too strong. Extreme weather events, which are basically indicators of underlying climate change, are with us all the time in so many different ways, whether it's wildfires, whether it's bizarre heat levels at the poles, whether it is catastrophic winds. So today, I think there is a consensus that we have. There is man-made climate change. It is catastrophically risky. It then becomes a question of how can we mitigate that climate change and keep that 1.5 degrees within reach, while at the same time ensuring that disproportionate burdens do not fall on those who did not choose to have to face this problem. And there's a very, very candid and authentic debate about how the industrialized world was largely responsible for climate emissions, and now the whole world is suffering from them. And the debate is extreme when it comes to countries saying, well, why should we now have to stop our development trajectory just because you caused the problem? Say when the Industrial Revolution, the main Industrial Revolution started a few hundred years ago. And I think the answer to that, which should be for all of us, is ultimately we're in a win-win space where potentially all the mitigation efforts that we can make are also cheaper and better for the planet to make.
Of course.
So actually, it's not a choice. It's not a one thing or the other. It's not development or fighting climate change, but actually with real ambitious moves, particularly around renewable energy, you could yet save the planet and profit. And it's a place like Egypt that seems to me to be a perfect example of this. Egypt is tailor-made, perfectly formed to be a massive generator of renewable energy, and a leader of an exporter of renewable energy. And this is partly through the brilliant luck, shall we say, that approximately 5% of the Egyptian people 95% of the Egyptian people live on 5 or 6% of the land, all by the Nile, and all those vast areas of sand with sun and wind on the Gulf of Suez coast are just perfectly made for renewable energy, and that renewable energy is something that the rest of the world really wants in high volumes.
Definitely. So you're still listening to His Excellency Ambassador Gareth Bayly, Ambassador of the UK to Cairo, with very important information about COP26 and 27. Stay tuned with us in World of Info after the break. So we're still listening into the World of Info, and His Excellency Ambassador Gareth Bayly, Ambassador of Britain to Cairo, UK to Cairo, and definitely there's a lot of things that goes into the field of cooperation. And education remains as one of the most important pillars of the progress of the UK. How was that possible? Because we talked about the education in Edinburgh or in Scotland, which was totally something more different school than that which was in London or in Oxford University, where highly specialization was going on. And there is always Britain has been, or the UK has been, always the Mecca for a lot of Egyptians to get a higher education. Tell us about the success story in education, how far it is successful, and how far the progress is maintained in such distinguished universities up to today. I mean, Cambridge and Oxford and a lot of other universities, and London School of Economics and the University of Edinburgh, all of these remain as very important pillars of education. How were they able to maintain such high standards?
Well, it's a very kind thing to say, and I think it is still likely true. And how it happens can be maybe almost a kind of magic, because no one university or education institution has is exactly like another. There's a sense that each one has their own identity, their own research agenda, and their own ways of teaching, assessing, and there's a lot of power that lies with faculty and with the board of governors of any particular institution. So what might work in the University of Edinburgh is a completely different show in the University of Oxford, and again in Imperial College London, King's College London, University College, just to name a few. And I'm missing out all the fantastic universities we see in the north of England, such as Manchester, Liverpool, Sheffield, Durham, just really fantastic. And they're all different. They all have their own agendas, and they have they are probably, if I was to make an observation, there really is no point in trying to fit them all to one framework. And if you did it, then the magic might disappear. That sense of innovation, creativity, everybody setting their own agenda, everybody attracting talent. And on that matter of talent, I think the second point, apart from independence and own agendas, the second point is internationalization. We've been very, very lucky with internationalization. Now, that probably part of this internationalization of our institutions is because of the English language, and that's that too is a bit of great fortune. You would be very kind to not talk to me about the empire, but I might as well talk about the empire.
You told me not to.
I didn't tell you not to. I'm very happy to say whatever you liked about the empire. But I think the thing was, there was a British Empire, and yes. I'm going to say now on the record, I don't believe there is a British Empire, but there's a lovely legacy for the Brits. Which, of course, our American friends have furthered most of all, which is the English language.
Yes.
And because of the English language, it is very, very easy to have an international agenda, because we just have a really strong flow and supply of faculty and students and researchers from all around the world who can plug in straight away.
Yes.
No difficulty with using English.
But this can be said as well for the United States. So,
absolutely.
But
yeah,
Britain has something
right.
special that really attracts people to come. I mean, for example, even the presidents of the United States had their own pilgrimage to the UK. For example, we know, of course, Clinton did and Obama did. So this is interesting.
Well, you're going to allow me then a mischievous comment that we have better English than America. So that must be the reason. But that's not the reason. That's not the
reason. Know the famous saying, bad English is spoken all over the world. You know.
Well, that is.
You know who said that?
That's possibly, and some of the worst of it is spoken in Britain itself. So we're all guilty here. And if my American colleague, Ambassador Cohen, is at all listening to the programme, then of course
I'll send it to him. Don't worry.
Manage. We think American English is perfect. We do have a higher education strategy, and that strategy is focused really intensively on internationalisation. And we're lucky then, because we're sort of reaching out and talent spotting and hunting for the best people that are out there. And currently about a third of all academics in UK universities are from elsewhere.
Yes.
Hundreds of thousands of international students in the UK.
And if I may, but to agree with you also as well, is the fact that all the universities that you have just mentioned, and even the universities that we didn't mention or give a say for them, definitely most of the universities of UK have received Egyptians having their degrees
Yes.
from there, whether these were masters or PhD or even undergraduate degrees. So this, why are the people are attracted to that? Simply because the internationalization is not just for the language, but definitely there is something
There's
more
something there.
more hidden, right?
Yes, there are a lot of things that are down to straightforward luck. Language, that for reasons of when it was created, the Greenwich Mean Time International Meridian was a completely arbitrary metric for where time is, where time zero is. The idea of Europe and North Africa being closely intertwined with each other, which means Egyptian students only have to jump across on a short flight of less than 5 hours and they're in the UK. So it's a hugely different prospect from going out to the States or further east to Southeast Asia or to China. It's straightforward. It's simple. We've got about 3,500 Egyptians studying in the UK. I wish there were actually many more than that, because Egyptians bring just an extraordinary diversity of thought, talent, creativity, which makes our universities as successful as they are, which is this point of internationalization. You have international faculty and international students, then you have something called success, and Egyptians are part of that success. I'm thinking of the wonderful Sir Magdi Yaqub,
Of course.
who is alongside Mo Salah, is probably 1 and 2. They are the two most famous Egyptians in Britain, shall we call them, and together, I think Mo is the master of something called football magic, and Magdi Yaqub would teach me. Well, I mean, he must know more in one of his little fingers about science and education than I will ever know in my whole lifetime. So, amazing students, amazing alumni, and real capability brought. And of course, on top of that, we invest, right? So we invest in scholarships and fellowships for Egyptians to come and study in the UK and research in the UK, whether they be working with PhD level scholarships as well, women working in science, technology, engineering and mathematics, and researching and educating there in climate as well. We have a very famous program called the Chevening Program, and the Chevening scholarships are up there, like the Fulbright scholarships, as being genuine international offers to Egyptians who will take a 1-year master's degree, then come back to Egypt and serve their country. We have even now, for example, the Minister of Water Resources and Irrigation today is a Chevening alum.
So, for example, the British Council role, which is another question,
Yes.
we want to integrate this in the
Yes.
same question about education, has had a great role
Yes.
in attracting young Egyptians to find an education and to find a chance in life, whether this chance is in the UK or coming back and serving their own country. For 2 years back, before the COVID, I was the Master of Ceremony in the British Council Awards, and I was very happy that you were distributing, at that time, Sir Geoffrey was distributing gifts or certificates of accreditation for the people who served, learned in Britain and came back with an education to help their community and their country. So there are a lot of stars on Egyptian lands who had this chance. How far is the British Council and the British government investing in this important prospect, especially that the president, when he went to Glasgow, insisted on meeting the university heads and and even the medical boards and Glasgow Royal College of Surgeons and Physicians in order to invest more time and effort in this mutual interest.
Well, precisely. So, I mean, the story is great. Right? So the British Council here in Egypt is the, let me see, it is the 3rd largest British Council office in the world. There are 2 very big operations in India and Pakistan, and Egypt is the 3rd. The British Council in Egypt is the oldest British Council in the whole world. British Council started here.
And he gave you your education of Arabic, right?
That's right.
So you're a student in the British Council, right?
أتعلم اللغة العربية في British Council, المجلس الثقافي البريطاني, المعهد البريطاني. And that was that was amazing, right? So I'm sitting in the British Council with a small class of foreigners learning Arabic, and all around me are hundreds of Egyptians learning perfect English.
Yes.
So you'd come out to try and do your Arabic practice in the cafe and find yourself immediately surrounded by Egyptians saying, "We want to speak English to you." So we have like an exchange like that. So the council is big, it's established. It has, of course, the obvious British Council offer is straightforwardly English language training, but the perhaps more interesting British Council offer is in things like research collaboration, helping universities come together to further research collaboration, and programs which are targeted on things like startups and innovation, which again the council is really, really good at supporting Egyptian-grown efforts to incubate startups, to push into science and research.
A friend of mine, if I may interrupt, in the 90s, he's an engineer, and he approached the British Council and asked him to help him to have a degree in business administration, and he was granted a scholarship. He went there, got a degree, master's degree in business administration, came back, and he's one of the very well-known businessmen now in Egypt. So I believe these stories of success are very important to mention and to spread the news that the British Council is also willing to help in these types of supporting individuals.
Definitely.
Even though he was not connected to university or whatever, he just approached as a young entrepreneur, as you have just said.
Absolutely, undoubtedly so. I think the council is very good at this. It's very good at explaining what Britain can offer. I often see the council as being the most visible part of Britain in Egypt, because the embassy, of course, is great, and I'm very proud of my team. But the British institution in Egypt that most Egyptians meet first is the council. And the council also does some really clever things. I'm thinking of a program called Premier Skills, and Premier Skills is a way of using the famous brand of British Premier League football to train trainers and to have the trainers train young people in communities the length and breadth of Egypt in life skills such as simple empowerment and leading in the community. And that's because it's done through the medium of football, and because it's got the association with the famous British Premier League, it has real impact on many young people that would never think of going to a British Council to go and open a book or access an English language program, but they love football, and they can learn life skills through football. So it's an institution of which I'm really, really proud. And the result somewhere in all of this, not just the council, but all of our efforts around the world, is that, as I understand it, 1 in 4 of the world's leaders today have a UK education. 25% of all world leaders has a UK education.
That's nice.
And 4 of the top 10 universities in the world are UK universities, which is, I mean, we're lucky. We're very lucky. And we need to keep investing to stay lucky, because,
sometimes a famous philosopher said once, there's nothing called luck. There is only hard work.
Yeah. So there we go. We're going to put in the hours and put in the effort.
Yes, exactly. So still listening to His Excellency Ambassador Gareth Bayly with a very interesting talk about Britain and about Egyptian-British relations. Stay tuned with us in the World of Info. After the break, more about Egyptian-British relations. Well, so we're still listening to His Excellency Ambassador Gareth Bayly, the Ambassador of the UK to Cairo, and we're talking about Egyptian-British relations, how far we are very much into cooperation, especially in the field of investment. You have talked brilliantly about Egyptian investment in the Egyptian government investment in the field of solar energy and in the field of wind fields. And of course, the admirable wind farms that we see on our way on the Red Sea towards Hurghada, they are increasing, they are multiplying, and they are going on. And also some solar fields are there, and you have seen, and it is well documented, that the biggest amount of solar fields and the biggest amount of producing of solar energy can be in Aswan. In the desert of Aswan, they can really produce magnificent amount of electricity. How far is Britain interested in this sort of investment and in other fields of investment in Egypt, sir?
There is no limit at all in renewables. Absolutely no limit. You will have noticed there's not a lot of sun in Britain.
Yes, I've noticed that.
So, where is the sun? The sun is here, and the wind is here, very steady. We have a lot of wind as well. You have a very steady wind on the Gulf of Suez, very north-south, reliable, all day, all night, every day of the year, the wind blows. So with your solar, with the wind, Britain wants to be right there. And you know that classically, the reason that Egypt has always considered Britain to be its largest foreign direct investor is a lot to do with the major oil and gas companies, BP and Shell, huge companies that are massive investments in the country. And what we want to do, and what they want to do, of course, is focus on transition to cleaner energy. And there is this phrase that the Stone Age did not end for lack of stones, and the Oil Age will not end for lack of oil. There will still be oil in the ground when we don't need it anymore. So we want to be here in this wonderful country. To give you an example, there's a very big and significant wind farm in Egypt called in West Bakr, so Bakr Gharib, I suppose.
Yes.
And it's where the wind strength is really at its highest. And there is such a requirement to keep investing and reinvesting in wind turbines. And Lekela Power, which is a British company, is just now started its commercial operations with 250 megawatts of power at West Bakr. So it's one of many examples. Another is Globalec, African-British company working in solar power, investing in Benban, the largest solar park in Africa by a long way, which is going to get larger still for sure in the years to come. So we're really keen on that. It makes us happy because it fits perfectly with the green partnership that we're all looking forward to throughout this year. And it will mean that we can remain one of the very biggest investors in the country. Currently we have about $50 billion of investment under management. About nearly 2,000 British businesses operate here. And they work across a whole bunch of sectors. Whether they're in manufacturing, infrastructure, retail brands on the street like Marks and Spencer's,
Yes.
pharmaceuticals, finance, all of it. But the thing that really excites me, my embassy, ministers in the private sector back home, is green. So let's go. Let's do this, Egypt.
So we're still going into talking about an important system just before we leave. The NHS system, which is a very important system, one of the most successful health system, and a lot of Egyptians are serving this NHS system for as far as my father was working there in the 50s and the early 60s, until even my brother-in-law who worked there in the 90s, and my students and pupils are working there in the 2022. So the NHS system is sort of a success story. How far can you share with Egypt your experience, especially when the president met the Glasgow Royal College of Physicians and insisted that they would come and share also with us their experience? I met the chairman of the Glasgow Royal College of Physicians when he came and visited our faculty back 1 month back, and it seems that there is a lot of cooperation going in. How far are you encouraging this sort of cooperation in the health education and the medical education?
So it's like education in a way that I'm very fortunate to be a British ambassador because both the health sector and the education sector drive themselves with extreme ambition. And I remember very well, like you say, that when His Excellency the President was in Glasgow for the climate summit, he was absolutely focused on health as one of the meetings he wanted to have at the side of the summit, and there he was with the Federation of the Royal Colleges all together, talking about what they could do for Egyptian healthcare. And the NHS is the platform that lies behind. The NHS is extraordinary. It's one of the, I think, is it not the biggest procurer of medical services in the world? It is certainly one of the very few totally public funded healthcare services. My experience of it, like any British person, is that you get fair access, equal access, equitable access to healthcare. and you can also access advanced medical technologies and have up-to-date medicines. And therefore the NHS is really our modern miracle, and it's something about which the British people are very proud. And if there is any way that the British NHS system can serve Egyptian requirements, and that is what it is there partly to do, is to be support to international healthcare. And I'm thinking here about the universal healthcare system that the Ministry of Finance, above all, and the Ministry of Health are working together on to bring to Egypt, so that all Egyptians will be
covered
able to
under
access
the umbrella.
they'll be covered universal healthcare. It's a very similar sets of ideas. And again, you know, it's exactly what the NHS is, a form of universal healthcare for the UK. It's not, of course, cheap. It's extremely expensive to run a service like that, particularly if your population is ageing, and therefore some very honest conversations need to be had about how you can ensure the system still works for all, when also there are rich people in society who can afford private healthcare. The NHS is there for all of us ultimately, and it still can be accessed by anybody and everybody in the UK.
Well, sir, time is running, and there are a lot of questions that we need to ask. So you need to give us a promise, like you have promised us that Britain and Egypt will continue their lucrative relation and the friendly relation in the field of economy, field of culture, and the field of education. We also have you to promise us to come again to talk more.
Inshallah, you are very seductive with your promises. And let me just thank you for hosting me, and the listeners for their patience. Sabr Gamil. Listening to me.
The hour has flight, sir. And
the hour may have flight.
No.
The music will have helped.
No.
But it is absolutely lovely to be on an Egyptian radio show, and knowing that out there are some of the finest people in the world tuning in, hopefully having a nice cup of tea and
definitely.
thinking about their evenings on a Thursday night. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. His Excellency Ambassador Gareth Bayely was with us tonight as a representative of his country, as the Ambassador of UK in Cairo, with great information, and we have exchanged a lot of food for thought. My name is Dr. Amr Mabrouk. Dua Muhammad was at the control. This was the World of Info, and we're coming live from Radio Cairo. Stay tuned to us.